Oh, so fabulous. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel once again. It's your girl Dumebi. If this is your first time coming across my channel, you're welcome. I do hope you decide to subscribe, and if you are a returning subscriber, you guys know that I love you. It's so good to have you here. So today's topic is something that is kind of strange. I never expected to see something like this happen, but then I won't really say that I'm shocked because I've heard things happen along these lines, and I'm guessing you guys are going to be as shocked and disgusted as I am. Let me go right ahead and roll the clip right now.
This is not okay in the least bit. And I know there's going to be somebody that says, oh, you're looking for controversy where it doesn't exist. No, this is an 1830s slave cabin that is up on Airbnb as a bed and breakfast. How do I know that this is slave quarters other than just using my eyes and looking at it? Well, they say it in the listing. This particular structure, the Panther Burn Cabin, is an 1830s slave cabin from the Panther Burn Plantation. How is this okay in somebody's mind to rent this out, a place where human beings were kept as slaves? Rent this out as a bed and breakfast. Here it is. That's it right there. The slave quarters next to the big house. It's in Greenville, Mississippi. That's the host, Brad, the super host. But what really kills me is reviews. Memorable. Highly recommend watching the sunset. We stayed in the sharecropper cabin and ate in the main house. Enjoyed everything about our stay. The cottage, the history, the tour, the breakfast, and all was great. We stayed in the cabin and it was historic but elegant. A slave cabin is elegant. What a delightful place to step into history, Southern hospitality, and stay a night or two. Cool spot, way better than a hotel. Maybe you're thinking, okay, maybe this will give people insight on how enslaved people had to live, their living conditions. No, not at all. Clawfoot tub, running water, tile, nice lighting fixtures, water, towels, dresser. The history of slavery in this country is constantly denied, and now it's being mocked by being turned into a luxurious vacation spot.
So this particular video was posted on TikTok by the man who made this video late last year, and when I saw this, I was like, wow, the caucasity. It is funny how these people have the weirdest, strangest fantasies. They get some kind of kick and joy from strange things that normally you look at it and you're like, oh, I'd never do that. Why should I do that? I shouldn't derive joy in things like this. But somehow they seem to just get some kind of high and kick off doing these strange things. And I'm wondering, like, how do you guys function? You turned an old slave cabin, refurnished it, and put it on Airbnb as a bed and breakfast. And you don't hide the fact that it's an old slave cabin, right? You put it there, and that is probably what even catches people, and they're like, oh, I have to go and experience what it feels like to live in an old slave cabin. Like, really? Anyway, I'm just going to go right ahead and play people's stitches and commentary to this whole situation.
1830s slave cabin that is up.
So it first started with having plantation weddings. Now they're using slave cabins as Airbnbs. And then the reviews underneath the Airbnb, where white people are like, it was historic. I got to watch the sun set and rise from a slave cabin. It's the disrespect for our ancestors that bothers me so much. It's bad enough that America doesn't teach our history accurately, but to make a mockery of what our ancestors went through and then still profit off of the pain of our ancestors. But white privilege doesn't exist. Racism doesn't exist. It's in the past.
As a bed and breakfast.
So I paid about $30 for admission to the plantation, where my family's history is all over the walls, literally. And I thought to myself, there's nothing more criminal than seeing a place still capitalize off of the pain and suffering of my ancestors. Then I saw this video. Now I know from the comments and a follow-up that this place has been removed, but the fact that this was up in the first place is insane. These were places that were cramped, overcrowded, and hot. Places where enslavers would come in and take what they want from mothers and daughters. and somebody decided to turn it into a luxury bed and breakfast. This is absolutely repugnant. Happy Friday.
1830s slave cabin that is up on.
You know, I tried to make this only 15 seconds, but I can't. See, I gotta explain something. See, the person who's offering that out as a bed and breakfast, their grandparents and their great-grandparents and their great-grandparents did not suffer any consequences for what they did wrong. So they don't see anything wrong with what they're doing. Okay? Now, to those of you who want to stay there and think it's funny and like disrespecting, you know, what we went through, okay? You understand? I hope you, your children, your future children, your future children, about 400 years worth of your future, die horrible deaths. I hope your family dies in a ball of fire in traffic. I hope you choke on something. I hope ghosts hunt you for the rest of your life. I hope that place and everybody who owns it burst into flames. Please, and
cabin that is up on Airbnb.
And it's not the only one. Not by a long shot. So after watching this creator's video, I decided to do some research of my own in Virginia, where I live, and the surrounding states, to see if any other historical listings raised some red flags. Now, while I can't definitively say that these listings were former, you know, what I will say is that they definitely raised some red flags. So, starting off strong, we have this place, which doesn't even try to hide what it was. And at Iden, the host asks you to step back in time to the elegance of a 19th century Virginia plantation house, luxuriously restored and furnished with period antiques. Next on the list is the Magnolia House, which is both a historical property and conveniently located near Thomas Jefferson's Monticello and James Monroe's Ashland Highland. And at this estate, they provide you with a somewhat authentic, historically distorted 18th century farm experience. Another interesting listing is the Riverview at Belmead Farm. Belmead Farm is a beautiful, multi-generational, 106-acre property overlooking the James River that was previously owned by Randolph Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson's brother. In the same vein is the historic Mount Lebanon, listed in Kentucky, and known famously for being built by the second governor of Kentucky, James Garrard, in 1785. And believe it or not, it's still owned by the family members. You know, the same family members that are still making a profit off of this awful estate. If none of those listings suit your fancy, you can also stay here at the Green Springs Plantation, in a historic home dating to around the late 1700s. And don't worry, they want their guests to enjoy all the charm its age brings with it. Now, if none of those were bad enough, here listed is a cozy and private riverfront cabin. Oh, okay, right, my head's in the... Yeah, cozy and private. Voted coolest Airbnb in Virginia. This cabin, originally built in the 1800s, was moved to its current location in the 1970s. It offers old school charm and modern comfort. This cabin. But if that one isn't rustic enough, you can always stay at the Tobacco Barn, which has now been converted to a one-room guest house. Yeah, please be aware of where you're staying and who you're giving your money to on Airbnb.
That is up on Airbnb.
Hear me out. Hear me out. So I have an idea. What about having some hoodoos and some voodoo practitioners to go and rent out that Airbnb, spend some time on the land and in that particular slave cabin, you know, communing with the dearly departed, leaving some libations and some offerings for our ancestors, and of course, those of the dearly departed who lived and died on that plantation or lived in that particular cabin. I think that's an amazing plan, and it would leave such an impression on anyone non-melanated who decided to stay there after the fact, and especially Brad, who lives in the big house, who would join me in such a wonderful endeavor, a gift that never stops giving.
That says, oh, you're looking for...
So I just wanted to share why it's not a surprise to me that they are using the quarters that the enslaved people used to live in as bed and breakfasts. If you guys recall, when I first shared the Devil's Punch Bowl over a year ago, there was literally a massive, unidentified grave of bodies along the Mississippi River in the Natchez area. You also have the Confederate Cemetery, but then you have several plantation homes along that road, and those plantation homes are used as bed and breakfasts. We have them in Louisiana, of course. So what shock if they'll use the house where enslaved people worked, right on the same land where the fields were. I mean, what nothing shocks me that people do. They really want to romanticize the history of this country. And even just as we think about things like the Confederate statues that still exist. The story I shared the other day about New Iberia, where they have a stadium named after a superintendent that literally had black men run out of town and beaten, and one that was beat so badly he died months later, and he got no punishment for it. The story I shared about Monroe, Louisiana, where an employer shot down 5 of his employees. One of them survived. The 6th one actually ran from town because he knew that he would be next, and none of these people were reprimanded. So the fact that there's never been any accountability whatsoever for the injustices that black people have faced indicates to me that why would anybody that has not been directly through this pain, whose family has not been through this pain, who are not descendants of this pain, why would they care? The United States is about making money at the expense of anybody, and they've been making money at the expense of black people since the first ship arrived in this country. Black pain has always been white wealth in America. But now is the time when we can demand some accountability, and I hope we don't back down from this one as well.
You're looking for
I don't think you're being controversial, but I do find it controversial that people don't realize that people are into some weird shit. Shock value is big business in life. Have you seen hoarders? There was a time I was obsessed with hoarders because it just truly boggled my mind that people could lose just their awareness of what they're living in. The worse it was, the more I was into it. We also love real life documentaries that involve murdering people because it's just like, wow, man, people are crazy. Which reminds me, hey, how are we doing on hydrochloric Slave House? Though you may not like it, it does have some great things that could potentially come from it. I can imagine some people staying in it to see the life that a slave had to live to humanize their lived experience. That's awesome because having that human connection is what people need sometimes to understand things. I could see others having a lineage to slavery and wanting to connect in that way as well. And that's awesome that they still can.
Be somebody that says, oh, you're looking for controversy.
I got a quick question for all my colored followers. Why is our trauma entertainment for y'all? And don't act like, oh, that's just a singular incident. No, I'm talking about those of you who go and get married at plantations. You know, the ones who turn it into events, antebellum South. Oh, historically and aesthetically pleasing. This is our trauma. How is this? Somebody make it make sense to me how you can literally go to a slave quarters and try to present it as if it's a bed and breakfast cottage, like it's something aesthetically pleasing, like this is nuance, like this is
that is up on Airbnb.
So before we started planning anything, I knew that I was going to have issues finding venues that did not have race casts. In the state of Georgia, it's heavily saturated. Almost every single plantation is now marketed as a wedding venue, and it's romanticized. Exactly like that guy said about the Airbnb places that they're hosting. I think he was at the Whitley Plantation. That's either in North Carolina or it's in Georgia. I'm just going off my memory. I can't remember. You can correct me in the comments. But because the wedding venue and Airbnb and like whatever market that falls in is so heavily saturated with plantations, and it's really disgusting. And if I didn't do my own research, because the websites are not going to tell you, you have to like really use an analytical skill set to like problem solve in your head. You're like, that's not right. We're not going to go there. There are no venues in the state of Georgia that meet my standard to get married in, and they're way too expensive. A lot of these venues, especially the plantation ones, are $5,000 and $10,000 to rent for 4 hours. $10,000 for 4 hours. And on the website of a lot of these places are like, oh, well, it's family, it's heritage, it's bullshit. That's bullshit. You're romanticizing the fact that you owned people and you forced labor upon them.
That is up on Airbnb.
When I was going to school in Bloomington, Indiana, I rented a slave cabin as where I lived for an entire year. It was a little tiny cute yellow house, and across the street was a little tiny pink house, and John Cougar Mellencamp lived in that town, and he would talk about the Little Pink Houses song. You have to go listen to it. That was what he was talking about. And I had no idea. I just thought it was like a little cute house. And then one day, a woman drove up and knocked on the door, and I answered, and she said, I grew up in this house. And I said, oh, really? And she said, yeah, I just wanted to see it because before I lived here, or I guess it must have been years, this was a slave house. Oh my God. I would have really thought about it differently had I known.
It's disappointing, I will not lie. You think that anybody who has any ounce, any bit, any atom of humanity and human decency would know that there's just something awkwardly wrong, morally wrong about doing a thing like that. But then this doesn't even come as a surprise to me, because when I covered this particular video, it was about a woman who makes it a point of duty to visit old plantation homes in the South and romanticize them, talk about how beautiful they are, disregarding the kind of history and the things that must have happened in that house. So if someone could do that, this doesn't come as a surprise to me. It doesn't. And you guys even heard in one of the other stitches, and I've seen videos and all of that, talking about how palm-colored people go and get married and have whole wedding ceremonies in old plantation houses and plantation homes. Like, it is crazy to me. Can you tell me that it is possible for someone to have a dream and fantasy about doing such a thing without being a ray to the system? Because if you think about the history attached to such places, the slave cabin, the old plantation homes and all of that, if you have any bit of decency or empathy or any bit of regret for what happened in those places to fellow human beings, that is if they even see black people as human beings, you should know that if there's anything you should be going to such a place to do, it should be to teach kids and educate people about the history. As far as I'm concerned, anything beyond that is disgusting. Like, where is your humanity? Anyway, that video went viral. It has millions of views, and of course, the man who made the video was getting several news outlets and all of that reaching out to him to talk about it, and then he came out and made this follow-up video.
Posting that original video, it got like 2.6 million views. I've literally spent the last 2 days on the phone doing interviews with CNN, NBC, BuzzFeed, The Washington Post, The Daily Dot, Daily Mail. Everybody has been in my inbox trying to talk about this. Airbnb responded. They said properties that formerly housed the enslaved have no place on Airbnb. We apologize for any trauma or grief created by the presence of this listing and others like it, and that we did not act sooner to address this issue. In the recent days, we've taken the following action. We've removed the Mississippi listing in question. We are removing listings that are known to include former slave quarters in the United States, and we are working with experts to develop new policies that address other properties associated with slavery. Airbnb. We also got a response from the current owner of the property, who actually closed on purchasing this property just 3 weeks ago. Here is the response from the current owner. You can pause to read the whole thing. But part of what stood out to me is that he says, before purchasing the Belmont, I strongly oppose the previous owner's decision to market the building as the place where slaves once slept after toiling in the cotton fields in human bondage. The previous owner, Josh Kane, obtained the building from the owner in Sharkey County, Mississippi. It was never part of any plantation. He goes on to explain down here that when the previous owner, Kane, first advertised the building as slave quarters, the original owner of the building told him it was not slave quarters, that it was in fact a doctor's office. So it was the previous owner that decided to advertise it as slave quarters. This is the second half of his statement. You can pause to read the rest of it, but he talks about how Airbnb and Bookings.com have suspended their advertising campaigns with the Belmont. At the end of the day, I think this is just a jumping off point for conversations that need to be had in this country, especially about the commercialization of plantations and properties and structures associated with slavery, and how it's gross.
So as you guys can see, the original owner of that, in quote, slave cabin came out to say that it was never a real slave cabin, that the person he sold it to just wanted to market it that way and all of that. And I'm calling this bull crap. Like, really, are we supposed to really believe that? And even if that was what happened, even if that was a true situation, it doesn't make anything any better. Because for that person who put up that cabin on Airbnb and decided to market it as an old slave cabin, he did that for a reason, right? Because he knows that people are going to be intrigued. His target audience, who are these weird people that have an obsession with wanting to stay in a house where people were oppressed and treated like animals. He knew that there was a market out there for it, and he decided to do what? To make money off of it. So it doesn't even make any difference to me if it was truly a slave cabin or not. The fact that it was marketed as such, because he knows that there's a big business and there's a lot of money to be made off of monetizing black people's pain, off of romanticizing that dark period in history of oppressing black people. You guys, I don't even know what to say at this point. Let me know what you think about this whole situation. Like, it's the weirdest things. And I remember when I made the other video about the old plantation homes and all of that, I remember seeing a comment that someone who watched the video dropped under that video, talking about how it would make sense for any member of the black community to buy these old plantation homes and use it to preserve the history of black people, maybe make it open for black people to come and tour, to learn the history, bring our black kids there. So when I saw that comment, I thought, wow, that's a good idea. If the black community could buy these old slave plantations and, keep it for ourselves, use it to honor our ancestors who slaved on those lands, and use it to also teach the history, I think it would be a great idea. And then allowing that place and the sweat and blood on those lands to be disrespected by the presence of palm-colored people who just come there to have a thrill and to romanticize such a time, and the pain and the sweat and the blood and tears on those lands, blood and tears of our ancestors. You guys, let me know what you think. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, also turn on notifications. That way YouTube will let you guys know whenever I have another video up. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.